Another news, French President Emmanuel Macron has made a trip to Israel as the West Bank continues its diplomatic push to find a solution to the Israel-Hamas conflict. Mr. Macron touched down in Tel Aviv earlier today, becoming the latest leader to visit the country in a show of solidarity. Now, speaking at a press conference alongside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the French president called for a decisive relaunch of the Palestinian peace process. He also threw his support behind the continued clampdown on Hamas, but emphasized the need to protect Gaza's civilian population as well.
La lutte doit être sans merci, mais pas sans règles. Car nous sommes des démocraties qui luttons contre des terroristes. Des démocraties donc qui respectent le droit de la guerre et assurent l'accès humanitaire. Des démocraties qui ne prennent pas pour cible les civils, ni à Gaza ni nulle part. Le respect des populations impose, en l'occurrence, de permettre l'accès de l'aide, de rétablir, et nous en avons longuement parlé très en détail, de rétablir l'électricité pour les hôpitaux, pour les malades et les blessés, sans que cette électricité puisse être utilisée pour faire la guerre.
Mr. Macron stressed that France and Israel share terrorism as their common enemy, proposing the widening of an international coalition fighting against the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria to include the fight against Hamas in Gaza. He also warned against the risks of a regional conflict as concerns grow about more Middle Eastern countries entering the war.
I want you to be sure that you are not left alone in this war against terrorism. Because I speak here on behalf of a country which experiences terrorist attacks unhappily. And you were there at the time. And I think this is our duty to fight against these terrorist groups. Without any confusion, without, I would say, enlarging this conflict.
Mr. Macron is expected to meet with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in the occupied West Bank, making him the first Western leader to meet both Israeli and Palestinian leaders. Our Ross Cullen has more now on Mr. Macron's visit to Israel.
Well, the French president first met families of some of the victims here in Israel. He said that the attacks by Hamas on the 7th of October were an immense shock. He said it was the duty of France to fight against terrorist groups. France has suffered terror attacks in the past, and the 30 French nationals who died in the attacks here in Israel makes it the highest number of French citizens who've died in a terror attack since what happened in Nice in 2016, when a truck was driven through crowds, killing 86 people celebrating the National Day in the south of France. The French president also here for meetings with the Israeli president, the Israeli prime minister, and some of the Israeli opposition groups as well. He has said that the first priority here in this region should be working towards securing the release of more of the hostages. We have had a mother and a daughter released, and then 2 elderly women as well. Hamas saying those releases were for compelling humanitarian reasons. Negotiations that have been led by Qatar and also by Egypt, and Emmanuel Macron wanting to see the release of more of those people who are being held captive by Hamas inside the Gaza Strip. In terms of the Palestinian enclave, more than half of the population of 2.3 million people have now been displaced, according to the United Nations, saying that overcrowding and access to clean drinking water is now becoming a major issue because of those people who have been moving south of the Wadi Gaza, the river that more or less marks the border between the northern half and the southern half of the Gaza Strip. People trying to move out of the way. There have been regular, over the past week and more, orders from the Israeli armed forces for people to move as far south as possible in the Gaza Strip, because the northern area is going to become soon an active combat zone. We still don't have a date or a time yet for the beginning of that widely expected ground incursion, but on Tuesday the Israeli Defense Forces saying that they are ready and determined to push ahead with the next stage of the war that Israel has declared on Hamas. also saying that overnight Monday night into Tuesday, hitting 400 targets, Hamas targets inside the Gaza Strip as the Israeli air forces continue their bombing campaign on Hamas inside the Gaza Strip. And also there is that discussion about the humanitarian aid. The United Nations saying that 20 trucks have been headed into the Gaza Strip on Saturday, Sunday and Monday, but in fact it needs to be 100 trucks a day delivering aid into the Gaza Strip to get it to the people who need it most. Ross Cullen, CNA, Tel Aviv.
One of the two hostages released by Hamas has broken her silence a day after she was freed. Yocheved Lifshitz spoke to media at the Tel Aviv hospital where she was being observed. With the help of her daughter, she recounted her time in captivity, saying that she was beaten during her abduction, but was well treated during her 2 weeks in Gaza.
My mom is saying that she was taken on the back of a motorbike with her body, with her legs on one side and her head on another side, that she was taken through the plowed fields with a man in front on one side and a man behind her, and that while she was being taken, she was hit by sticks by Shabab? Yeah, Shabab people. Until they reached the tunnels.
But the 85-year-old added that there was a doctor visiting every 2 to 3 days providing medicine. Ms. Lifshitz described her captives as, quote, very friendly and very courteous people.
היו מאוד עדיבים ושמעו שאנחנו נהיה נקיים, שאנחנו נאכל, אכלנו את אותו אוכל שהם אכלו. זה פתאום עם גבינה לבנה, גבינה מתכת ומלפפון. זה היה ארוחה ליום שלם.
Her husband, however, remains among the more than 200 hostages reportedly taken by Hamas. The two hostages were released just days after Hamas freed 2 American women. They were reportedly let go for humanitarian reasons after mediation by Qatar and Egypt. The UN Palestinian Refugee Agency and the World Health Organization, meanwhile, are calling for an unimpeded flow of aid into Gaza. Trucks have been trickling in via the Rafah crossing, carrying vital supplies for Gazan civilians. But aid agencies reiterate that is just a trickle in the face of the immense needs of the Palestinian people. The besieged enclave has fallen deeper into a humanitarian crisis after more than 2 weeks of continuous air bombardment by Israel. Displaced residents also raised fears of the spread of diseases in camps where water and medical supplies are scarce.
تكدسات المواطنين واحتواء المدارس على العدد الكبير وغير يعني قدرة استيعابية للمدارس، هذا عرضة لانتشار الأوبئة والأمراض أمثال يعني النزلات المعوية والتهابات الجهاز التنفسي والطفح الجلدي، وهذا ما يتردد كثير من المواطنين على المستشفى للعلاج بهذه الأمراض.
Israel's military says that it's ready for the next phase in its war with Hamas. It has ramped up airstrikes on Gaza in recent days, claiming to have killed dozens of Hamas fighters overnight. Tel Aviv has also amassed troops and tanks on the border with Gaza ahead of an expected ground offensive.
הלוחמים שלנו, לוחמי צה"ל, ערוכים בשטח, מוכנים ונחושים. הם ממשיכים להתאמן ליום פקודה. שבועות לחימה ארוכים לפנינו, נפעל בעיתוי המבצעי הנכון ביותר ועל פי הנחיות הדרג המדיני.
The army has released more surveillance footage of their attacks on the besieged enclave. Gaza officials said that more than 120 Palestinians were killed in Israeli airstrikes overnight that targeted inhabited homes across the Strip.